My name is Elizabeth Quinn. I am the writer of the series.
And I'm Laura Knight, and I directed the series.
We just wanted to give you a little peek behind the scenes about the series and how it came to be. Should I start, Laura?
Of course. You had the inspiration.
I did. Well, yes. I just want to say the process has taken years, which, as Laura knows and people who know me know, I'm a very impatient person. But I'm saying that to say, if you're working on something and it's taking a long time,
hang in there.
Hang in there. There's a reason for it. But over a decade ago, I heard a story on NPR about a divorce ranch. It was in Reno. And I knew a little bit about that there were divorce ranches. I knew because of the movie The Women, which was a fabulous movie from the 1930s and more of a comedy where the women go to Reno to get a divorce. That was all I knew. It was a really short story, but they talked about this family in the 1950s that had a divorce ranch where women would come. And in Nevada at that time, you had to establish residency. You had to stay for 6 weeks to become a Nevada state resident. And then you would be able to get a divorce. And so there were like hotels and boarding houses and ranches that would offer a place to stay. And this family owned it and their children were there. And I just thought that was so fascinating. And I don't know, Laura, have you ever gotten an idea that just stays with you?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
You can't shake it. And that's how this was for me. I remember thinking it just kept percolating. And I thought, what an interesting idea that would be for a series to just explore not just the divorces, but Reno, the legal stuff, but just what goes on this divorce ranch, especially with children, when you have a family there. And how does that impact your views on marriage and divorce? And then this particular family was focused on the 1950s, but I've always been fascinated by the 1930s. And the more I researched it, I found out in 1931 is when Reno had always been this haven for divorce seekers. So even before 1930s, it was the place to go because, I should say for the listeners, up until the 70s, I would say maybe, every state had different laws concerning divorce, like what grounds you could claim and what the rules were and how long it would take. So it was very state by state. This was before no-fault divorce became a thing. And then in 1931, we have the Great Depression. And so Nevada, the state, is like, we should probably do something about our financial situation. And so they legalized open gambling and reduced the residency requirement from 3 months to 6 weeks. And they created this whole industry. It was a thing where you knew if you said you were going to Reno, that people knew you were probably going there to get a divorce, maybe to gamble. So I started writing a pilot. I wanted to create this series. And Laura and I had met working on a show together. Laura was my boss at that time. I was your intern.
Yes.
And so that's where we first met. And Laura, who is one of the most awesome people you'll ever meet. And she's always looking for stuff to do. If you have anything, Liz, let me know. And I was like, hey, Laura, I've got this great idea. And she really liked it. That was several years ago. And then do you want to talk about how you came back into my life with it?
Yes. Well, we bumped into each other a few weeks before. Was it before your birthday?
It was at my 50th birthday party.
At your 50th birthday party.
I'm going to say 50.
And I was like,
I don't want any shame around aging. So
no, not at all. So absolutely not. And I asked you what was going on with it. And I was like, that idea has stayed with me. What are you doing with it? So in the same way, like you talked about, it went into the brain and planted a seed.
Oh, I was very flattered that you felt that way, that it also resonated with you like it did with me. So it was my 50th birthday party. And the reason that's important is because literally 2 weeks before that party, I remember thinking, what do I do with this? I got to do something with this idea. And I thought, you know what? I think I could make this a fiction podcast. I think that's doable. I think it's manageable. A movie or a web series just felt too overwhelming. And so that was literally 2 weeks before my party. You had come because it was such a momentous birthday. And you had brought it up. You said, hey, what's going on with Going Reno? And I was like, it's funny you asked that, Laura, because I've just decided I'm going to turn it into a podcast. And the next sentence out of your mouth was, can I help with that? I was like, yes, thank you. Please help me with that. And then we just started meeting about it. Luckily, I wanted to write it. You wanted to direct. And I was like, great.
Well, perfect.
And we started working on it. And then wouldn't you know, the pandemic happened.
Exactly. Right? Life gets in the way. It's so annoying.
It is annoying.
But we recorded a test just to kind of put together a little teaser to see about making the series. And we recorded it like 2 days before lockdown.
Yeah,
And
crazy.
so it was, yeah, so then the world shut down and it felt like, you know, as so many artists did during that time, it was like, how do we use this time to our advantage or just keep going, right? So from there, we kind of developed the entire show of like a 9 episode series and yes, and kept going back and forth with notes and ideas um and thankfully it like helped my pandemic be so much better by reading all of your writing, Liz. So it was a really nice collaboration that I think kind of got us through that crazy time.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree. Well, first of all, thank you. But yes, I would write drafts. She would give notes. She would, it was a wonderful collaboration because we always got along really well. But this was our first really professional working together. Like, well, I
Mhm.
worked for you on the show, but I basically just did whatever you told me to do on that. So it was pretty easy working relationship.
Yes, this was much more collaborative.
This was much more partnership, collaborative, and it was great. And you're in, and I have this idea, but so I do like to take credit for that. But Laura, like you, honestly, you helped elevate this to a whole other level. You had great storyline ideas. You had great character ideas to add, and this is where I'm grateful because a lot of writers end up working in a vacuum or they work by themselves. I love the collaboration, but I'd been working by myself for so long. It was so nice to have someone to bounce the ideas off of it because you just, as most writers know, it's hard to see your writing objectively. It's just hard. I just don't think there's any other way around it. And that was so great. So yes, that got us through the pandemic and we thought, should we try to record remotely? And it was just too much and it was too stressful. Like that was 2020.
And then when we came out of the pandemic, there were so many rules and regulations of how many people you could put in the room. So our cast had to be in 2 separate rooms. They weren't allowed to be together and they could look at each other through a glass panel so that they could kind of act with one another. A love scene was really interesting during that time. Then you had to clean the room and give time in between and a lot for that time. And so budget definitely increased. And that was unexpected and difficult.
I'd love to record another season, if for no other reason than to not have that experience.
Exactly. Exactly. To have everyone, all of our actors just be together and enjoy the time together and act off one another. So because they all got along, they just wanted to be in the same room.
I know. It was so, yes, they were so great. And it was really just because we're an independent production, we had, as anyone who's done an indie production knows, it's a tight schedule, it's a tight budget, you've got to do what you can. But everyone was great. What I love too, Laura, is that we got the wonderful Bonnie Hunt and Joelle Carter. We were so overjoyed and flattered that they wanted to be part of our project.
Right. That they not only came on as our wonderful cast members and gave us incredible performances that I feel so lucky to have, but they also came on as executive producers of the series and really have just championed us and been great cheerleaders for the project. And I'm so appreciative. It felt like a really nice, kind, feminine energy, like just really collaborative group.
I felt so lucky. We are based in Los Angeles, Laura and I, and we each know so many amazing actors out here. And so the bulk of our cast are people we know and have worked with that are local, that I was so happy to give them a chance to shine, as I know you were too. Yeah.
Especially coming out of the pandemic, it just wasn't as much work and it was hard, right? And so it felt, it's not like our budget was so tiny,
budget was,
but at
yeah.
the same time, it was really nice to be like, hey, I really, really appreciate you. And I think that, that your work is amazing and you should get more of it. And so if I can just do my small part by casting you in something, I'd feel great. I feel like just makes the process go so much better when you create a family, of
Absolutely.
amazingly talented people around you and them shine.
Our cast is amazing. I can't wait for everyone to hear it. And then I will say during the production, you can plan as much as you want. We always had a mantra, there's always a solution. That was our mantra that got us through anytime there was a hiccup or whatever. And I really believe that, and I think it worked. But then we got into Tribeca, 2024 Tribeca Festival in the independent fiction category. We were an official selection and got a special jury mention. Not only did we get a nice boost just from that laurel and that feather in our cap, but
Just made it feel like, oh, wow, we're on the right path.
yeah, it was validated. And then, eventually we had to forge ahead independently. So we get to own it, which is nice.
The landscape has changed so much over the last year when it comes to fiction podcasts, and they're just not getting the funding that they were several years ago. And so it's sad to me that some of that is drying up, that we're not able to have as much beautiful fiction storytelling out there for us to consume. And I do think there's an audience for it. So again, thank you for listening to our show. But I think that it really kind of steered us in the direction of how do we do this independently and maintain our ownership of it and stay true to our desire to make something that felt like a really great historical drama for listeners, because I don't know, I love them.
I know, I do too. It's just the two of us. We're independent in every way, and including financially. So it takes as long as it takes, as my friend Ray likes to say. To that end, we're releasing now in 2026. I don't love that it's politically relevant right now to what's going on with women's rights. That's very sad, but
I hope that it's resonating in the fact that women have to travel across state lines to exercise their rights, right? So,
yeah.
yeah, I think we can all, understand or have that universal feeling of heartbreak at times and the ending of relationships and trying to feel empowered and start something new and change, right? And how do we handle change? I think there's a lot of just that simplistic kind of feelings that that we all have that we can relate to, but then these bigger themes of even just the fact that we're talking about ending no-fault divorce makes this show relevant right now.
So yeah, that last thing I think we should talk about.
Hold on a second. Yeah. Hold on a second. So I'm going to ask you the question because I'm sitting here. So when it came to this story and it gave it hook, got its hook in you, I think one of the things that was so interesting to me was your perspective on marriage and love. And maybe you might share that with us.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. So I grew up, my parents divorced when I was 10. So I grew up in a single mother, I'm a single mom and I had an older sister. So it was a very female centric household. So I knew what that was like. So yes, thank you, Laura, for asking me that, because I will say aside from the historical part, that just the divorce there, it definitely resonated with me, just this idea of divorce and how divorce affects your views on relationships. And I think it does. And I do remember my mother, because my mother was kind of on the cusp of the silent boomer generation, and she was very adamant that me and my sister were financially independent. Like that was just really drilled into me. I'm single, but I'm not anti-marriage or anything. It was definitely a focus. It was like, you need to be able to make your own money. And I didn't understand it when I was younger, but now looking back, I get it. My mom's generation couldn't have a credit card without a husband's permission. There were so many things they couldn't, and going back even further, having a bank account or property or anything. And so now I get why she was so adamant about it. And yeah, so I think that was certainly part of it. And yeah, I don't know. I should talk to I think that's more of a therapy session, what my views on marriage and divorce.
Well, no, I mean, for me, it was my views on marriage and divorce were very different.
Yes.
And which we've talked about. My mother and father stayed together for their entire lives and just had that kind of that love that's unbelievable, that, was like such a great example to me and my family. But in the same breath, my mom ran a wedding invitation business out of our home. And so, which is wild, right? So I grew up and we would have, clients come over and it would be a new, an engaged couple, and they'd sit down and try and figure out what their wedding invitation was going to be. And sometimes the mother would come, sometimes the mother-in-law would come, sometimes there was heated debate and there was a lot of conversation after they left that I don't know if that one's going to work. Like,
your mom knew.
So, yes, and you could see what was happening, the dynamics, and at the table of making a decision that, really kind of gave you a glimpse as to what their future was going to hold. So it was very interesting. And weddings in particular were kind of drilled into me as being important. And so I rebelled.
Yes. Would you say you had a very traditional, your mom had a very traditional outlook on that?
My mother had an extremely traditional outlook on life and what men and women were supposed to do and how they were supposed to act and how they were supposed to treat each other. And the patriarchy was strong. And so, yes, so I rebelled in every way and went the opposite and like took a very, very long time to get married to my husband. We dated for like 14 years or something and drove my parents crazy.
They're like, when is
yeah. So it's, just very different.
But that's funny. I think, but obviously I think there's that whole nature versus nurture. Like your attitudes on marriage come from personal experiences. They come from your family. Yes. They come from society, the culture, the time frame, when you were born, so many factors. And I think for me, Going Reno, like I said, that seed was about the ranch and this family running a divorce ranch. But again, looking at like independent, men and women's roles in society, how does that change? How do we view that? Marriage and divorce, being independent, what are women, quote, allowed to do? Or does society, there are just so many themes that we'll dig into in another time in more bonus episodes, which
we hope you enjoy. We hope you come and check out.
But those will be on our Supercast, which is
goingrenoseries.supercast.com. The other thing that drew me to the show was my desire to make a big female ensemble project. I love big ensemble female casts, especially period pieces. I just get so excited. And to me, I wanted to really hear a lot of the women's stories and how they relate to each other, how they can lift each other up. I think so many times women have a sense of competition that I feel like is finally changing in today's time. And I love that. And so I think that it was great to kind of explore how women can maybe get out of each other's way and and be all in the same boat when it comes to divorce, even though they're there for so many different reasons.
Yeah. And that's not to say we don't have conflict. Like that's just going to happen. And women, we definitely are going to have disagreements and fights and all that. But yeah, at the end of the day, Reno set up everything to make divorce easy, but they didn't cover the emotional fallout. The women had to rely on, and I'm sure the men who were in Reno got together and did whatever men's thing, but whatever men do to support each other. But women,
whatever the men do,
whatever they
I don't
do.
know.
But women had to support each other, and that was the comforting part of like, hey, we're not, whatever society thinks, we're all here for the same reason. We're all in the same boat, and that you're right, Laura. That is really another special aspect of the show. Thank you again for listening, and please spread the word about Going Reno.
Yes, tell your friends.